Bard on the Plains podcast with Mike McPeak. It's about stories, mine and yours.
This time around, I thought I'd do things a little bit differently and tell a few of my own stories. Mom's Nighttime Visitor. In 1999, when we moved from the farm into town, Mom decided to stay there and live by herself. She was comfortable there and she could, take care of herself. I would go out there and do things for her and take care of things that would break or fix the stuff that needed to be taken care of, but for the most part, she was able to take care of herself. The one thing that Mom always did, even way back when I was in high school, she would go to her TOPS meeting every Tuesday night in Clark. Now, TOPS stood for Take Off Pounds Sensibly. It was a weight loss support group, and even though she'd kind of met her goal a few years ago, she still kept coming for the support and the camaraderie and to, kind of visit with people and get out of the house for a little while. But before she would go to her meeting, she would always do a little shopping and come up to the house to visit with us for a little while. Well, this one night she came in and she sat down. We started talking, and she said, she had a visitor in her bed last night. I'm kind of going, okay, Mom's 88 years old. Dad passed away about 25 years ago. She never dated anybody, never been serious. So I'm kind of sitting there going, okay, what are you going to say here, Mom? And she said, no, what had happened was she woke up in the middle of the night and she felt the cat moving around on top of her feet, which was really strange because she felt the cat up there by her head on the pillow. So she turned on the light to look to see what was going on, and she saw a skunk on her bed. So she kind of screamed a little bit and got out of bed, but tried not to scare the animal, because if you scare it, it's going to spray and the whole house is going to stink. So, her heart is kind of pounding, and she's, kind of a little more than a little nervous about this, but she keeps her head and she just kind of eases out of the room, and she gets a broom and opens up the front door and just kind of really gently starts to try and shoo the skunk out of the house. And it took a few minutes, but eventually she got the skunk to go outside and close the front door. And after she got herself calmed down and everything, she went back to bed eventually. But then we sat around and tried to figure out what was going on. And what we think happened was we have a unfinished basement in the house with dirt walls on some sides, and it's near kind of the water table. So in the springtime, when the snow melts and the water table rises a little bit, we get water that comes into the basement. So we had a sump pump down there to pump the water out, and we just had the hose going through the basement window with the screen taken out, and we just left the window propped open. So the skunk must have wandered around and fell into the basement window, and then walked up the stairs and just kept walking till it got to Mom's room, and the bedroom there, probably heard the noise or whatever, and somehow or another got up on top of the bed. Teenagers, shotguns, and beer. Sometimes I think the only reason that I'm here today is because of the grace of God and because He must have bigger plans for me, because when I was a kid, I would really do some stupid things. One of the things that we would do to entertain ourselves out here in South Dakota in the middle of the winter is we go out jackrabbit hunting. This was the late 70s, and there'd been a jackrabbit population explosion because we domesticated the land. We'd gotten rid of their natural predators, so the jackrabbits just kind of the population just exploded out of control. So people would go around hunting jackrabbits, try and get them under their population under control. And so we would do really intelligent things like go out in the middle of the night with shotguns and go spotlighting, which was illegal. And we would stop someplace and get some alcohol, which was illegal because we were all teenagers then, under the age of 18, which was then the drinking age in South Dakota. And we would go driving around out in the middle of the country at night, chasing jackrabbits and shooting them. This combination of youthful exuberance and ignorance mixed with alcohol made for some interesting situations. A friend of mine would take his dad's old Dodge pickup out, and we'd go hunting with it. It was only a two-wheel drive, and we're driving down some of these back roads that had snow drifts on it, and didn't have a lot of traction to get through some of that stuff. So he came up with this idea where he would take two rear wheel weights off a tractor, mount them to a couple 2x6s that fit just between between the wheel wells on the pickup and the tailgate. This wheel weight was probably about 4 feet in diameter and probably weighed about a good 300 pounds. You would add them to the rear of the tractor to give it some traction when it needed it for pulling equipment. So he had this mounted to these 2x6s, but they just sat there. They weren't bolted down to the pickup bed. So this one night we're driving down the road. We're looking for rabbits. There's a snowdrift up ahead. So he thought, well, it looked like it was probably a soft snowdrift, and wanted to get some speed up so you could get through it, so you didn't get stuck and we'd have to push to get it out or dig the wheels out, dig the snow out from in front of the wheels to get it out. So he sped it up and we hit that thing. It was hard as a rock. Pickup flew up into the air. We came down, kind of did a Dukes of Hazzard jump. And when we came down, that wheel weight came down a little bit after the pickup did, and it kind of landed on the rear, the fender wells of the pickup there and kind of smashed them down a little bit. They were kind of rubbing on the tires. So we're out there, it's cold, it's dark, and we're trying to bend these wheel wells up enough so that we could get home without rubbing the tires. So he got it home, and then he eventually got that fixed so that we could drive it around again. But, we just kind of beat the heck out of that poor pickup. The Gift of Blarney. The jackrabbit population was so bad that they would organize these big hunting parties, and they would go out at like a Saturday or a Sunday, and they'd hunt a bunch of them. And it wouldn't be unusual to kill a couple hundred jackrabbits at a party like this. So this one time they were having a party down in the town of Bancroft for all these people that went on these hunts. And if you'd gone on the hunt, you could get into the party for free. Otherwise, it'd cost you like $25 to get in. Well, my friend and we was down there, and he's always been a bit of a BSer. He could, tell a tall tale and be able to convince somebody that it was really true. So we was down there, and they asked, well, which hunting party did you guys go on? And my friend said, oh, that one south of town, that one. Oh, you mean that? And the guy said, oh, you mean that one? The one that was so cold and dig. Yeah, that's the one. And he managed to talk us into that party, and we didn't have to pay anything to get in, just because he's always been one of those good storytellers. Animals gone wild. On our farm, we raised cows, pigs, and sheep, and there was always incidences that went on with all these animals. I remember one time, it was January. The temperature wasn't too bad. It was like in the 30s or 40s. It was during lambing season, and the sheep were all just out in the pasture roaming around. And Dad had gone to town to do some stuff, and he told me to go out and check on the sheep, and if any of them had lambs, to bring them from the pasture into the barn and put them in a pen, because we'd always keep them in the pen for a day or two, so to make sure that the lambs were healthy and the ewes were taking good care of their lambs and everything. So I went out there, and sure enough, there was a ewe that had her lambs on a patch of hay that out there that we'd put out for them to eat, and she was taking care of them. But I went to pick them up anyway and bring them up to the barn. She kept charging me, and I couldn't move without her trying to charge me and bunt me, because she didn't want me messing with her lambs. She was a good protective mother. And I thought, well, the sun's shining, it's not a bad day, everything seems to be going right, I'll just leave them out there until Dad comes home. Well, Dad comes home, I told him what he did. He said, well, you're just not doing it right. So he went out there and he picked up the lambs and he started running towards the barn. Well, the sheep was able to run faster than he was, came up from behind, bunted him. He fell down, face down on the ground, spread eagle, and the lambs went flying. And I resisted the urge to say, yeah, you're doing it right, because I didn't want to really get into a fight that bad with Dad. But eventually we got him in the barn where they were supposed to be. Another of the chores that we had to do was the castrating of the pigs. A few days after a sow would have a litter of pigs, we'd have to go out there and we would castrate the male pigs, because if you didn't, when they grew up, their meat would take on a kind of a bad flavor and you wouldn't be able to eat it. And besides which, you didn't want them running around reproducing uncontrollably, or that would lead to one heck of a mess around there. So it was my job to get into the pen and grab the pig, and Dad would take the razor blade. I would kneel down on the ground with the little pig clutched between my knees and grab its back legs and pull it back so Dad could get to the place that he needed to. Well, the little pig obviously wasn't happy, and because while Dad is trying to remove his front feet are up there kicking mine, trying to take care of mine. The fact that I've had kids still surprises me. Normally, we'd try to get the sow into a small pen before she had her pigs so that we could keep an eye on her, and it'd be a smaller place when did need to get a hold of the little pigs to take care of them. We wouldn't have to chase them all over the place. But this one time, this sow got sneaky and had a pigs out in the barn, this large barn, and so we had to get the pigs and do the vet work on them. So Dad's bright idea was to, since I was young and could run fast, we would just sneak in there while they were sleeping, and I would grab the pigs and start running, and once we got in the barn, then we would do the vet work that we needed to on them. Well, okay, so I grabbed the pigs and I started running. Well, little pigs squeal, and they squeal really loud. And when the sow hears it, she knows that her little pigs are in danger, and so she's going to go after whatever is threatening them, which was me. So I'm running as fast as I can, and the sow was gaining on me, and I was afraid that she was going to get me. And sows can be pretty vicious. They can rip and tear flesh if they get a hold of you. Well, thankfully, our dog Rover was there and was running beside her, and she decided to take off and chase him. Otherwise, it might not have ended up so pretty for me. Now, to be fair, Dad wasn't the only one that had bright ideas. I could come up with some of my own, too. This one time, the bull got out of its pen. Now, we always tried to keep the bull separate from the cows, and we'd turn them out in a specific time, usually about June 5th, which happened to be our wedding anniversary. My wife was never too happy about the timing of that one, but it worked out well. If you turned them out about June 5th, you'd have March calves, which would work out well for the way we did had things planned out around here. But like I said, you needed to keep them separate, and anytime anybody that's had that urge knows that you really need to do something about it. And the bull wanted to get out and satisfy that urge because he could see the cows over there and knew that he had to be out there doing his thing. But he didn't understand it wasn't time for him to do that yet. Well, he got out, and I'm trying to get him back in the pen. And I'm trying to chase him, and I'm the only one at home. There's nobody there to help me, and he's just running all over the place, and I can't get him to go where I want him to go. So finally, I went and got the tractor, and I went and got our lasso. I attached one end of the lasso to the end of the tractor, and I went out there and got close to the bull. And I'm not no like expert roper or anything, but I'm out there with the lasso, and finally I get it around his head, and he pulls it tight and it goes on, and I capture him like I need to, and he's fighting it and he's not happy. But I take the tractor and I drag him back up to the pen where he needed to be, and I drive in there with the tractor. But then the flaw in my plan is, how do I get this rope off his neck? Now, it had what it called a quick release Honda on it. You reach up in there and you pull this thing loose, and it'll pop off, and the loop will come off the bull's neck. Well, you got to get up close to an angry bull to try and get your finger in there to get that thing to pop off. Eventually, I got him. He kind of got tired and slowed down a little bit, and I went up there and managed to get it loose. But this wasn't one of my brighter ideas either. With all these stories of castration and killing and control, it sounded like we hated animals, but really we didn't. Nature has its own way of population control, whether it be through predators or starvation or diseases. And we realized that when we moved into this country, we upset the balance by controlling the coyotes and getting rid of them. And that's why the jackrabbit population exploded. And we knew that we had to do something to bring it back under control. So really, I mean, we did love animals. There were many times that we brought chilled newborn animals into the house to try and warm them up because the mother had gone off someplace and had them in the cold or in a snowbank, and we didn't find them right away, and they looked like they were almost dead, and we would bring them in to the house. And the best way to try and revive an animal like that was to put them into a bathtub and start filling it with water and try to bring their body temperature up right away. And quite often that would work, but then the problem would be that when we would try to take the animal out to introduce it to its mother again, they may not take it because we'd washed their scent off them and they didn't smell right, and there was a possibility that they would reject it. And so we had quite a number of bottle animals around there that we'd have to feed, bottle lambs and bottle calves, and so we would have to buy milk replacer and mix it up and go out there and feed them. And you would kind of become attached to these little animals, even though eventually what would happen to them. But you went ahead and did it anyway. You took care of them, and because that's the way that nature worked. All dogs go to heaven. We had a number of dogs on the farm. First one I remember was Penny. She was just a little house dog. I don't even remember what kind of breed she was. But she was just a little dog that we would turn out and she'd run around the farm and then she'd come back and stay in the house. So that was the first dog I remembered. Then the next one was one that he just wandered up to the house there at some point. We never quite figured out where he came from. We suspected one of the neighbors had him and just kind of let him wander off because he had enough dogs of his own. But that dog, well, we call him Napoleon. We call him Rover. He answered to several names. But the strange thing about this dog, he was already a grown dog when he got here, but apparently he'd been trained a little bit because we could leave the gate to the pasture hanging wide open, and that dog wouldn't let anything get out of the gate. If anything got out, he would chase him right back in. So without us having to do anything, we'd gotten a nice, well-trained dog. One day Napoleon wasn't feeling very good and was growling, kind of snapping at us, so Dad took him to the vet and he checked him over, and the vet found out that he had kidney stones. They did surgery, but it didn't go so well. Napoleon passed away. I cried a lot that day. The next dog that we got was a registered blue heeler by the name of Rover. He was pretty good with the sheep, and he was around the farm a lot, and he would ride in the pickup with Dad sometimes. And I remember this one time the sheep got out and started running down the road. Well, Dad decided to jump in the pickup and try to head him off and bring him back. So Rover got in there with him, and he's driving alongside the sheep trying to get ahead of him. And this one old ewe decided to run out in front of him. Well, Dad run over with the pickup because he couldn't stop in time, and he rolled the pickup. It was a slow motion roll. It just kind of went up on two tires and kind of teetered there and went over onto its side. Did a little damage to the pickup, and Dad was kind of shook up. But then about that time, he got out of the pickup, and about that time the bee man came along with his truck with a bunch of hives on it and said if he needed some help getting it back up. And Dad said yeah, so they had a chain, and they pulled it back up onto its wheels. When it came back up onto the wheels, the bee truck driver looked over there and said, "There's a dog in there." Dad hadn't gotten Rover out because it's kind of hard to get him up out through the door, and he was quite scared. And from that day on, every time he wouldn't go into the pickup voluntarily, and when we would get him in there, he would just shake uncontrollably. He just had a fear of the pickup after that. Rover was with us for a number of years. A couple of years after Dad had passed away, I saw he was getting kind of starting to slow down and get kind of, old and stuff, and I knew his time wasn't too far off. When the end was near, I put my arms around him, told him what a good dog he'd been, and then I laid him to rest. We had a few other dogs after that, but they weren't around too long. They suffered from a series of accidents and, just end up dying. The last dog that we had on the farm was named Lucky. This was a dog that wandered on somebody else's farm, and they didn't really want him that bad and wanted to know if we'd take care of him. And us being kind of the soft-hearted people that we were, said, yeah, sure, we'll take him. And this was another peculiar dog. We suspected he'd been raised in a place where the husband had been abusive to the wife and kids, because Deb and the kids could walk across the farm, across the yard, and it wouldn't be cause any problems. But I would walk across there, he'd be running after me and kind of nipping at my heels and kind of barking at me. I always had to keep my eye on him because he would try to sneak up and try to bite me in the back of the leg. Or I would be talking to the kids or maybe yelling at them because they'd done something wrong, and he'd start barking at me right away, trying to protect the kids. And I never hit the kids or anything. I was just yelling at them because I was mad. But he was always trying to protect the kids. He was always very protective of Deb too. But this protectiveness was his downfall. People would come up there, and he would sometimes he would chase them, and sometimes he'd nip them. He nipped my sister in the leg and drew blood, and she wasn't happy about it, and she thought we should do something with it. Well, we calmed her down and talked her out of it. But then a friend of ours, a friend of Mom's, was to the farm there with her family and was walking around there and nipped her and drew blood, and we knew that this couldn't go on. Somebody was going to get hurt really bad if this didn't something wasn't done. So we called the sheriff and had him taken to town and put to sleep. I've told you these few tales about growing up on the farm to show you what it was like to see birth and death up close and to make tough decisions, but the decisions weren't any tougher than the ones that Mother Nature would make for you.
If you have a story you'd like to tell, contact Mike on Twitter @BardOnThePlains or by email at bardontheplains@gmail.com. For more information about the stories in this podcast, visit bardontheplains.com.